Hey guys, my name is Emil Vidal-Carr. Thank you so much for joining me on another one of my videos. I'm sitting here in my freezing cold studio, hence why I've got this coat on, which I made by the way. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you a comparison of what it's like working in high-end fashion compared to high street fashion. Hope you enjoy. Make sure you stick with us till the end of this video because I think the last one is probably the most vital point. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you will know that I started my career off in high street fashion, selling to the likes of Topshop, ASOS and Alders. And it is fiercely competitive. It's very aggressive in terms of its sales tactics. In Topshop, I think we had sales targets of £1,000 a week that we had to achieve. And at that time, if you didn't achieve your sales target, you had 3 warnings. And on that third warning, you are out. So whether your sales target was £500 or it was £5,000, you had to achieve it so for those of you that live in London, sorry to exclude my international viewers, if you've been down to Topshop in Oxford Circus where it used to be, down in the bazaar section, I had one of the concessions down there for about 3 years and we did pretty well. And you basically get a space. They calculate how much that square footage is worth to them. So if they've given us a sales target of £1,000, that means the square footage that we take up is worth that much to them. And that's how much they want us to generate in revenue. Now, the thing with high-end fashion is it's not so cutthroat. There is more of a relaxed vibe. There's definitely a more different feel when you go into a high-end store compared to a high street store in terms of the customer service that you get. Whilst some people that like the snootiness of the customer sales reps in high-end stores, they are like that for a reason because they are looking for an exclusive clientele. I would say with high street, there's less attention to detail because there is that drive to meet targets in terms of monetarily and in terms of design and schedules. So where I've worked for businesses like, I don't know, Monsoon, and I've worked at John Caldor and other places, there is attention to details to a certain extent, but they'll never go past a certain point because there is that fear that they will produce a product that is far beyond the budget of the client. So where I've worked inside Marks and Spencer's, they are very hot on the pennies. So if something goes over 20p, then either the technical manager or the buyer manager has to justify that 20p because that carries on over thousands and thousands of garments. So whilst it might look like a minute amount of money, it does add up when you think that 20p is going to be multiplied by, I don't know, 10,000 garments. With high end now, there isn't so much attention on the pennies because naturally you're trying to make the most money possible. The thing is, I've been guilty of doing this myself where I will intentionally add things just to make the product more expensive, but I'm trying to add more value to the product proposition for the client. And I know brands like Victoria Beckham, Roland Murray, Alexander McQueen do this all the time. I'd say that high street is more forgiving, where as long as you're following style and color trends, then you're bound to get someone that will want to buy from you. Whether it's a 16-year-old that's trying to find her way and create her own kind of look within fashion, or it's mid-30s or early 40s professional women that wants to just run into the store and just get your basic white top. High street is perfect for that. I guess with high end now, the customer is intentionally spending. There's no accident about their purchase. They've thought about it for a long time and then they've planned around it. So when they step into the store, when they part with their money, it's for a particular reason. What you'll find is with high-end brands like myself and others alike, we don't focus as much on color trends or style trends. We focus more on timeless pieces. So if you look at one of my pieces today, if you saw it again in 10, 20 years, you wouldn't really think it looked out of place because it didn't follow any style trends of the current day. So as I mentioned earlier, high street is very price sensitive, and not only from the back end where you've got the factory and the buying team, trying to crunch numbers, but also from the consumer perspective. Let's say a high street brand is trying to sell a top for £22. Now, if they try and sell it for £25 because I don't know, inflation's gone up, running costs have gone up, that might be the difference why a customer doesn't buy, just that simple £2 or £3 difference. Now, some of you guys are going to slate me in the comments for saying this, but customers that spend money with high street brands are kind of looking for the cheapest option possible. So if they set in their mind that they want to spend £22, they've probably got that £8 allocated to something else. Comparatively, I'd say a high street brand probably makes about anywhere between 10 to 15% profit on a product. Whereas with a high-end brand, a super high-end brand, we probably make in the region of about 70% profit on the product. But the difference is high street sells more in volume but high-end sells less in volume. Now, if you're thinking of starting a high street fashion brand, then beware, because it is fiercely competitive. At a wild estimate, for every one brand that is trying to get into the door, there's another 50 brands that are chasing you to get into that competitive field. So you really need to have your work cut out. Whereas if you want to be a high-end designer, the barriers of entry are still pretty low and also far less competitive. But you really need to know what you're doing, because there's not really many of us that can really take the high-end bull by the horns and make this thing work. So next, there's the topic of sustainability, which I'd say most brands out there are just greenwashing, especially high street brands. And it's impossible for them to do it properly. I just wish that they would be a bit more honest and not have to feel like they're jumping on the bandwagon just to make money. Now, I've seen brands, I've worked with brands, I won't mention any names, where they profess all these different promises to the customer, but behind the scenes, they couldn't give a damn about sustainability. Whereas with the high-end fashion brands, you know that they're making maybe, 10, the most 20 units of any one style. There's a lot more care in the process. The likelihood is that they are making in the UK or a reputable factory where the workers are paid correctly, they're paying their taxes. There is that responsibility in terms of tracking where the fabric has come from, how the fabric has been dyed. So there is a lot more, responsibility, and then there is a lot more accountability when you're designing a high-end product. So following on from sustainability, there's the topic of wastage. It is widely known that the fashion industry is one of the most, if not the most wasteful industry in the world. And having worked in a number of factories, as well as my own factory, wastage is a problem. And then what I try to do myself is give offcuts or remnants of fabrics to local artists or local schools. So that reduces the amount of wastage that our one business produces. Whereas I guess high street, as great as it is, so when you're dealing in high street now, if you've got a proper pattern cutter, a proper garment tech, a proper factory, they will take really great steps to, ensure that the way the patterns are laid out, there's minimal wastage as possible. But that being said, when you create 2,000 garments, there's enough fabric left over to make maybe another at least 20 garments there. So I admit it is a problem, although I don't quite know what can be done about it. I know there is this movement towards 2D and 3D virtual reality rendering. Time will tell if that's going to work. So these next two terms, trickle up and trickle down, aren't widely known unless you've actually studied fashion. But trickle up is where trends start from the poor classes, i.e. the high street, and then work its way up to the upper classes. I'd say the most obvious example of that I can give is from, the most obvious example I can give of that is hip hop and street culture. Now, trickle down is where styles start from the high end, the rich folk, and then work its way down to poor folk, high street. I'd say that it's far more difficult for styles to trickle up because in most cases, people won't want to take ideas from a class that is lower than them. And if they do, they won't want to assign credit to them. So my main point to sum up is, if you want to start a high street fashion brand, you're going to find it more difficult to rebrand yourself and sell products for more money, as opposed to if you started with a high-end fashion brand and then you decided that you wanted to create a diffusion line which gives which not only widens the audience that you're appealing to, but allows people to access your product and your brand for a lower price. I would say that the success rate of a high street brand is quicker, but I'd say that it's harder to maintain that success rate. Having sold in Topshop, ASOS and Orders, I would say within the space of 6 months, we made a lot of sales. And the only real way that we kept that going is that we kept on churning out the same stuff that those buyers wanted from us or demanded us to design. So when it came to breaking away from that, it became very hard to maintain the level of sales that we were selling previously. Whereas if you're a high-end brand, there isn't that pressure. But I would say that the road to success is much longer. Unless you come from a rich family and you've got a lot of money and a lot of great connections, be prepared for your road to success to be a lot longer. Now, my final point is comparing the cost and revenue of having a high street brand versus a high-end brand. It's very likely that both brands are earning £100,000 a year revenue. What you might find is that the high street brand, they're probably earning only 10%, which is £10,000, 10% profit. Now, you might find that the high street brand, whose revenue is £100,000, has a profit margin of 10%, which is £10,000, but they're having to sell 20,000 units. Now, the high-end brand, who might have the same profit margin of 10%, also £10,000, their unit sales might be 100 units. So technically, the high-end brand has a far bigger output for less input. There it is, guys, my comparison of high street versus high-end fashion. Hope you enjoyed it. Love to see you on the next video.